Hi, I'm Joe Graydon.
I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy, where we bring you the stories behind the health headlines.
This podcast is brought to you by Redix Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Body Cream. 800-345-7339, on the web at uttercream.com. When a renowned neurosurgeon goes into the round pen to train horses, the lessons he learns apply to everyday life. This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Dr. Allan Hamilton was formerly chief of neurosurgery at the University of Arizona. He still teaches in the departments of neurosurgery, radiation oncology, psychology, and computer engineering. He also trains horses and is engaged in equine-assisted therapy.
His previous books, The Scalpel and the Soul and Zen Mind, Zen Horse, provide insights into the human condition. His most recent book is Lead with Your Heart, Lessons from a Life with Horses.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, find out what Dr. Hamilton has learned about leadership, mindfulness, patience, and happiness.
First, the news.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, doctors used to prescribe codeine to kids who'd undergone a tonsillectomy or appendectomy. But the FDA has determined that this opioid is not safe for children and can be deadly. The agency has warned doctors not to prescribe this drug to children for any reason. There's a black box on the prescribing label to this effect. After this caution was issued, most doctors did stop prescribing codeine, but a review of the records for more than 300,000 children between 2010 and 2015 showed that about 5% of children are still getting codeine. Doctors should be prescribing ibuprofen or acetaminophen, not codeine, for children following surgery. If pain is severe and a child needs an opioid analgesic, the recommendation is for hydrocodone or oxycodone, since they're metabolized differently from codeine.
As people get older, they may suffer from chronic shoulder pain. Orthopedic surgeons often recommend surgery called subacromial decompression for shoulder impingement. This type of pain is brought on by bone spurs rubbing on soft tissues such as rotator cuff tendons. It's different from a torn rotator cuff. Arthroscopic surgery allows for minimally invasive removal of the impinging bone. British researchers randomly assigned roughly 300 patients with chronic shoulder pain to this type of surgery, sham surgery, or no surgery. 6 months later, they asked patients about their level of pain. There was no difference between those who had undergone actual surgery or sham surgery. The researchers conclude that their results call into question the value of this popular operation. Instead, patients may wish to consider physical therapy, anti-inflammatory medication, or topical liniments for pain relief.
The next time you suffer a cut, a scrape, or a blister, you may want to make sure you get plenty of sleep so your wound can heal more quickly. Scientists conducted an experiment to find out how sleep and nutrition affect healing. One group of volunteers was allowed to sleep normally for 3 nights. Another group got a beverage containing nutritional supplements twice a day, but were allowed to sleep only 2 hours a night for 3 nights. The third group slept 2 hours a night and got a non-nutritive placebo beverage twice daily. The investigators monitored the wounds by collecting fluid and analyzing it for inflammatory compounds called cytokines. They also measured skin barrier recovery time. The volunteers who drank the nutritionally supplemented beverage had a more robust immune response at the site of the wound, but healing times didn't improve. The most important variable in skin recovery was sleep. The individuals who were only allowed 2 hours of sleep a night had slower healing times. The authors conclude that relatively modest sleep disruption delays wound healing.
New guidelines from the American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology will likely classify nearly half of American adults as having high blood pressure, above 130/80. But is your doctor measuring your blood pressure correctly? The guidelines reinforce long-standing best practices for blood pressure measurement that seem more often honored in the breach. Many clinics and hospitals rely on technicians rather than nurses for such measurements. Here is what the AHA recommends. The patient should be sitting comfortably in a chair with both feet flat on the ground. The back should be supported, and the arm on which the measurement is made should also be supported at the same height as the heart. The person should sit quietly, without talking, for at least 5 minutes before the measurement is taken. The cuff should be the correct size, and it should be applied to the bare arm, not over a sleeve. Doctors should not rely on a single measurement. At least 2 should be taken during the visit, and measurements taken on 2 separate occasions should be averaged before diagnosing a person as hypertensive. You can improve the accuracy of the measurement by making sure your bladder is empty and you have not had any caffeine or tobacco within a half an hour before the measurement. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Making informed decisions about your health can be incredibly confusing. There's so much contradictory data, it's hard to know what to believe. Sometimes it helps to step back and get a completely different perspective on the process of learning and making decisions.
To help us do just that, we turn to Dr. Allan Hamilton. He's a neurosurgeon, a teacher, and a horse trainer. He was a script consultant for the television series Grey's Anatomy. He's a professor of neurosurgery, radiation oncology, and psychology, as well as electrical and computer engineering at the University of Arizona Health Sciences Center. We interviewed Dr. Hamilton about his books, The Scalpel and the Soul and Zen Mind, Zen Horse. His most recent book is Lead with Your Heart, Lessons from a Life with Horses.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Allan Hamilton.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you back again, Joe and Terry. I can't tell you. I feel like I'm back with homecoming or family.
We feel the same way.
Now, Dr. Allan Hamilton, you're well known for many things, including neurosurgery, computer guidance systems for delivering high-intensity radiation, as well as simulation technology. But some of our listeners may not realize that your work with horses brings you as much joy and meaning as your many scientific achievements. Why are horses so important to you?
Well, for a host of reasons. One, my grandfather raised me, and he was a cavalry officer and a very accomplished equestrian. So it was sort of in my blood from the very beginnings. I was a riding counselor at camp, and then I started training horses for the last 25, 30 years. But I think the real reason they're so important to me is, for me at least, they are like sensei. They are like Buddhist sages who I go back to over and over and over again and say, teach me more about life, teach me more lessons that I can take into my regular life, answer my questions for me. So it's really a process of inquiry, and there's something joyous about connecting with a life form like that, that just makes my heart soar.
A lot of people have heard about horse sense. Not all of us have had the opportunity to experience it. So can you tell us a little bit, please, about what it feels like to be connecting with a horse that has horse sense? Do all horses have horse sense?
Yeah, when people bring me horses with problems to train and so on, I always say there are no horses with horse problems. They're just horses with people problems, and that's my job, is to help them with the people problems. But horses are sort of perfect in the sense that they are intimately connected with each other, in communion with each other, and constantly reaching out and looking for partnership and peace and tranquility. So they have this horse sense. And the problem is, as human beings, it takes us a very long time to develop that horse sense. And really, it's because it takes us a long time to listen to the horses and understand what they're trying to say. Ray Hunt is one of the fathers of natural horsemanship. I said, what do you think it takes to be a reasonably proficient, not expert, but a reasonably proficient horse person, horseman or horsewoman? And he said, I don't know, maybe 10,000 hours. And I go, whoa. And he goes, is that too little? So it's one of these things. It takes a while, but first off, kids get it very, very quickly, as you can imagine, because it's all very intuitive. But adults, we have to break down a lot of things that we've learned and a lot of barriers that we've put in place. But it's there.
Speaking of adults and your colleagues, you've trained neurosurgeons for many years. You've had a lot of interaction with other health professionals over the years. And I'm just wondering how, your experience with horses has changed you in the way in which you interact with your colleagues, but more importantly, how you interact with your patients.
Well, I think that's an incredible question. It's hard to limit it in some ways. Let me give you some real quick examples. The average patient, there was a study done, the average patient gets interrupted within 29 and a half seconds after they start to tell their story to the doctor. So they'll come in and they'll say, so what brings you here today? Well, I had this headache and it started. When did it start? Was it severe? Where was it? So one of the things the horse teaches you to do is let go of this agenda that we always have as predators. Answer my question. Tell me what I'm after. Let me get to the diagnosis. So the first thing the horse teaches you to do is let go of the agenda and let them tell their story. And it's amazing how the patient will lead you through all the information and take you to the diagnosis. It's so much easier when they have been allowed to tell their story. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you learn to be very aware of the energy that you're giving off to other people. So, you want to work on being a good team member. So you're very aware that when you go into the operating room, you want to establish with your body language a peaceful atmosphere where everybody's feeling like this is good. We're all together. We're all ready. This guy knows what he's doing. We're going to have a good operation. Same thing with the code. We used to go barreling down the hallway, holding everything in our pockets. And, we get there and we go, tell me what's going on, what's happening, And so now I've learned, literally from horses, when I get there, I'm not out of breath. I get there and I walk in, I say, so tell me, catch me up on where we're at and what's going on. Because that quieting down quiets the whole room down, and it makes everybody in that room say, okay, we're all professionals. We all know our job. We're going to do it very well, instead of sort of getting the adrenaline going so hard that we're not listening to each other. We're not a team. We're not well coordinated. So those are just a handful of, I always now say when people present on rounds, have the person who's presenting stand next to the patient in bed. And so you say to yourself, why? Because it used to be they would stand at the end of the bed and present to all the other doctors there, and the patient was behind them. By standing next to the bed, putting the bed rail down, you're sending a physical bodily message of we're standing together to present your data to all the other doctors who are here. But I'm with you presenting all of this medical information. So it's just these little signals that horses pick up on.
Well, it's so interesting when you talk about the teamwork in particular. I spent one summer working in a laboratory of electroencephalography at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York under a renowned neurosurgeon, and everybody just feared him. And when he walked into the operating room, the nurses, everybody in that room, they were scared to death because he was going to scream and shout at them. He was going to curse at them, and he was going to throw stuff, including scalpels, if everything wasn't where it should be, when it should be, and how it should be. And people were just so afraid. And so there was this kind of intimidation factor, very different from what you're talking about.
Well, if you think back to some of the things that we work on in the simulation environment, going back to the terrible air collision in Tenerife where two 747s rolled into each other on the runway. Well, when the aviation experts went back through that, the reason it happened was the co-pilot was so terrified of his pilot and his anger that when the tower told them to stop twice, and then the second time the senior pilot started rolling through the taxi point, he just didn't have the nerve to say they didn't give you permission to roll forward. And so that accident changed everything. And so, you think about that kind of, Captain Bligh, captain of the ship character. And, he's cutting himself off from everybody in the operating room who can help him. And it's a very counterproductive style. It's very old school. There was a time when surgeons sort of felt like they had life and death grip, like a crew on a ship, if they could throw you overboard if you mutiny. But those days are long, long gone. And there's a lot of evidence in terms of human factor analysis and so on that has shown what works is the herd. What works is teamwork. What works is the sense of in a horse herd, everybody looks to the alpha mare to say, I'm looking out for all of us. I'm not just looking out for me. And what gives that alpha mare every single day, the reason they bestow on her the right to be their leader is she always shows, if there's danger, I face it, you stand off to the side. If there's water, I make sure there's enough for all of us. If there's browse, I know I need to find enough that we can all eat, not just me. So it's a very different attitude, but certainly one that should be taken, in your pocket, so to speak, to the operating room.
Dr. Hamilton, alpha mare? I mean, everybody's heard the term alpha male, but alpha mare? So it sounds like she's taking care of everybody else first, whereas the alpha male is all for me.
That's absolutely true, Joe. I mean, the interesting thing is that the horse world is a matriarchal society. It's built on nurturing long-lasting, lifelong relationships. In fact, the males can very often be disruptive. And when the females feel that the males are too disruptive, they chase them out of the group. And that's their punishment until they've learned to behave. And then the group lets them back into the herd. So, yes, it's a world that's dominated by matriarchs who pass the knowledge on from one generation to the next.
You're listening to Dr. Allan Hamilton. He's professor of neurosurgery, radiation oncology, psychology, and electrical and computer engineering at the University of Arizona. We're talking about his latest book, Lead from the Heart, Lessons from a Life with Horses. Here's a quote from his website that we'll share with you. His website is allanhamilton.com, ALLAN, Hamilton.com. If someone asked me what's the greatest key to unlocking the meaning of the cosmos, I'd point to the human brain. It's the Hubble telescope of consciousness, peering into the deepest and farthest contexts of awareness that rival the universe in scale, complexity, and design.
After the break, we'll find out how Dr. Hamilton thinks horses have made him a better person.
Breathing and mindfulness are central to working with horses and with humans.
How do our expectations shape the outcomes we get? What can we learn about mastering ourselves?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you value the health information you get when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, consider subscribing to our email newsletter. You'll get the latest health news and information on upcoming podcasts delivered to your inbox twice a week. Look for the link at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Redx Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions that deeply moisturize to make dry skin feel soft and smooth. The number is 800 345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you'd like to purchase a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. This is show number 1062. The number again, 800-732-2334. Or you can find it online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today we're talking with Dr. Allan Hamilton about what he has learned from his very different roles as a neurosurgeon, medical educator, and horse trainer. Why are horses so central to his ability to communicate more effectively with patients?
Allan, in your book, Lead with Your Heart, you talk about how horses have made you a better person. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that works?
Well, I think one of the major things that I wish they had taught it to me earlier. I got to say, I think I would have been a better parent for it. But one of the things that happens with a horse when you're working with them is if you're too intent on the goal, if you're focused too much on what you want, trying to get the horse to do, the horse senses this almost, again, predatory drive that you're not there for the horse as much as you are there for the accomplishment. And so the horse starts to say, well, you're not focused on me and you're not showing integrity in terms of our partnership. So the way I translated that was this idea of, particularly with my teenage kids, very often they would be telling me, of course, as they all tell all parents, this, you're doing this wrong and you don't know what you're talking about and this is what I want to do and this is what my friends do. And, and all I'd be doing was waiting for them to take a breath so I could tell them what was right, what I thought. And, you realize I wasn't really listening. I wasn't devoted to listening. And I wasn't being a good dad. I wasn't being a good partner because I really needed to have enough patience to let them say whatever they needed to say and truly listen to it without thinking about what I needed to do, what I wanted. So that was, I think, one of the most important lessons that I learned. But I've also learned things like how to just separate my emotions from my energy, which sounds like a very peculiar thing, but we're hardwired that when we want more energy, we jack up our emotion. So being that I'm a university professor and the single most important and contentious issue that we have is parking, I will, I'll use that as an example, which is, somebody's in my parking space. I go, hey, get out of there. That's my parking space. I was there first. And I kind of am jacking up my anger. Okay. With the horse, when you do that, when you say, get going, come on, get faster, pick up your gait, what happens is the horse goes, well, I know I need more energy to go faster, but why are you mad at me? Because all I really wanted was I wanted to get something accomplished. I really wanted to say, how much energy do I need to put in the system to get the job done? Not how much emotion do I need. And so what the horse teaches you is you are in a reflexive situation where you are always combining emotion and energy together, but they don't need to be, and you need to become mindful of when you actually want to put them together versus I just default to that.
Well, mindfulness is one of the great themes of Lead with Your Heart. And you talk a lot about how to use this energy most appropriately. So you talk about escalation, but escalation only to the appropriate point. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So this goes back to the whole thing about emotion and energy and just looking at energy as what does it take to get the job done. So what's elegant in horse training is the least amount of energy to get the job done. That saying, you walk softly and carry a big stick. Well, you don't need to carry a big stick, but you do need to walk softly because people with a lot of energy are very quiet usually. So the thing is, I sort of use this modality of you ask, you request, you demand, and you promise. So, if I'm asking somebody, hey, you think I could have this on my desk by Tuesday evening? Okay, that's ask. Request. Hey, make sure I have this no later than 5 p.m. on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Demand. Make sure this is on my desk by Tuesday by the end of the day without fail. Promise. You don't have this on my desk by Tuesday, I'm going to fire you. Now, you don't want to go through life at the promise level. You love to go through life at the ask level. So I'm very well aware that the horse is always saying, use the least amount of energy, because then you're elegant, you're using your energy effectively, and it's obvious then that you're communicating effectively. And I use that all the time at work. I always am going, am I asking? Am I requesting? Am I demanding? And how much energy do I need to get the job done?
You also talk about breathing, and you mentioned that a moment ago with regard to horses and how they can sense that. And I'm just wondering, what can we learn from being aware of our breathing and how it will affect the people around us? In particular, as a teacher, as a professor, how it affects your students.
So, Peter Matheson in The Snow Leopard had this wonderful line, which is, the very breath we take is the lesson that all great teachers have been trying to show us. Breath is the core of our energy. So whenever we're trying to release energy and get quiet, it has to be through breathing, because when we hold our breath, if you just do it, if the listeners just do it right now and you take a breath and just hold it, okay, you can feel the tension in your chest, in your body. That tension is there, and so does the horse feels it. So whenever I want to tell the horse, hey, you've done something beautiful and you've done it right and you've done what I've asked, I always have this mantra, which is pause, pet, breathe, which is I want to pause, I want to pet the horse to thank him for doing it, but I want to breathe, because when I breathe, my energy gets very low and quiet. And very often you'll see the horse take a breath in unison with you. So breath, we're holding our breath most of the time. We're just not aware of it. So if you want to find out how much you're holding your breath, try and set your phone sometime when you have the time, but every 10 minutes, okay? And just have it give you a tone, and then ask yourself, take a deep breath and feel how much lower you can make your energy by taking that deep breath. So one of the things that horses teach you is to be exquisitely aware of your breath and how you can use it to slow the horse down and calm the horse down. There's a video on YouTube. You can go to my website, which is allanhamilton.com, ALLAN. There's a horse that just got bitten by a bee or a horsefly or something, and he's all, riled up. And all I do is I use my breath to get that horse to calm down. And so, you'll see this horse, as I relax my breathing and I slow myself down, that horse gets calm, because he senses the peace next to me, and he says, I want to be there too. I want to be in that lower energy state.
So how do you use that breathing with your students or with your patients?
Okay, so one of the things is I'll use it all the time in the operating room. If I'm at a moment in the surgery where it's very tense and I'm worried about, are we going to be able to dissect this plane, and are we going to have control of this vessel? The very first thing I do is I say, okay, I need to get to a lower energy state. It sounds funny, but this business of it's the lowest energy to get the job done. That's what the brain wants you to do. The brain wants you to be incredibly gentle and incredibly respectful of the tissues. And you want to be moving with the lowest amount of energy and applying the least amount of energy to the tissues as possible. Patients recover beautifully when you do that. Again, with my students, very often they're students, and they're learning how to do the physical exam, and they're learning how to give a history, and they're learning how to go in and start doing tests. And I go, look, you need to breathe. I'll go, look at you. You haven't taken a full breath in the last 3.5 minutes. So I'll teach them. I said, you want to breathe, and when you're with that patient, you have to exude a sense of calm. So one of the things I always say with simulation is, don't go into a patient's room and fumble. Because when you fumble, you get tense, and then the patient gets tense. And, people don't realize patients are looking at every little body cue for what you're doing and what you're saying. And, so if you think about it, when we distrust what people are telling us, it's because their body says something than what's coming out of their mouth. So when you walk into a room, you want to be very confident that you know how to do that procedure. You shouldn't be doing it if you're not confident about it. When I was an intern, a guy came in with appendicitis. And if you diagnosed appendicitis in the emergency department as an intern, you got to do remove the appendix. So this guy comes in and he's got appendicitis, and I'm all excited. And, I book him for the operating room, and I bring the consent. And I said, we're going to get this surgery right on the books. And he says, well, who's going to do it? And I said, well, I am. And he goes, well, how many of these have you done? And I said, you mean counting yours or not counting yours? So, that was a sign I really wasn't intimately familiar with the procedure. So the attending took me through the appendectomy. But the point is, you want to be very familiar with your procedures. You want the patient to see you're in command of what you're doing. You're competent, you're proficient, and they're in good hands. And you also want them to understand they can relax. You're going to try and take care of everything. Their questions, their concerns, their anxieties, and before and after whatever the procedure, the surgery, or the visit is all about.
Allan, in the book you describe taking some troubling problems into the round pen when you are working with your horses, and we should tell people that in this situation, you're working with the horses. You're not riding the horses. You're getting the horses to move around in the pen. And you say that bringing that problem to consciousness and even maybe asking it out loud. Obviously, your horse can't answer the question, not in words, but you say, actually, the horse often gives you an answer. How does that work?
Horses speak to us metaphorically. So it's a real issue to understand that the message that you're getting from the horse is written sometimes in a very different metaphorical language than what you're after. So I think I mentioned this in the book, or a similar example. We're working on a building right now, a big building on campus that I'm involved in. And, I had one meeting where I just sort of felt like people weren't understanding what I was talking about. They weren't getting the point, and I wasn't making an impression about how important this was. So I went home, and I wasn't feeling good about the meeting, and it was going to be another 3 weeks before everybody got together. And so, I said, oh, gosh, and I just was in a kind of a rushed, not angry, but frustrated mood. So I went out to the round pen, and one of these horses kept cutting the corner off. And he kept cutting the corner off on the round pen. He would go around, and then one part of the round pen, he would just come straight across to the other side. So I wanted to get him up against the rail. And every time I went to move him with my body to get him up against the rail, he would still make the shortcut because I wasn't in the right – I hadn't anticipated it enough, and I wasn't prepared to be in the right place to get my body so that he would – shape up against the rail. So eventually I said, I'm going to go way ahead of him, get way prepared, and I'll be in position. So when he tries to cut that, my energy is right there and he stays on the rail. And it worked. So then I go, well, that's my problem. I wasn't prepared at that meeting, and my energy wasn't at the right place to turn the group to where I needed them to go. So I went back and said, that next meeting 3 weeks from now, I'm going to be completely prepared. I'm going to have my PowerPoint there. I'm going to set it up on GoToMeeting, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I realized, the horse was saying, hey, you weren't prepared. You weren't in the right place to turn the group to where you needed to go.
How did it work?
It worked beautifully. I think when we set the cornerstone of the building, we'll bring the horse and have him just put his hoof in the cement.
How do expectations shape outcomes?
Oh, boy. All right. So expectations, I talk a lot about this. People talk about intention. They say, oh, if you want something in life, you have to put your intention out there. And that sounds very vague. People say, what does that mean? You put your intention out there. With a horse, it's very easy to see intention. Okay, because what happens when there's intention with the horse is you can sense before something's going to happen that it's going to go perfectly. Because in your mind, you've already seen the end before you start. And then the horse is carried by that shaped energy, that shaped focus, and it goes perfectly. It's almost like you didn't have to do anything. So the best example I have is when Michael Jordan used to fade back for a three-point shot, and you knew before the basketball left his hand that it was headed for the net with a swoosh. Okay, so it's that idea that it's almost like preordained that basketball will go where it has to go. So I think with this notion of intention, we have to be aware that are we truly visualizing and putting it out there that it's going to be perfect? If it isn't, it falls apart. If we just start, slapping energy around it, it will fall apart. It'll be confused. It won't happen. By the same token, if you don't really believe something's going to happen, it won't. And I see that every single day with horses. If the person goes into the task going, this horse isn't going to go over the jump, guess what? He won't go over the jump because the horse is sensing exactly that you haven't shaped the intention. So it sort of teaches us to put it out there and shape it and see it and use our energy to really focus it. At the same token, you have to let go of it because perfect intention is I see it out there, it's going to happen, but I don't care if it does or doesn't because I'm much more interested in my lifetime with that horse than I am whether he gets over this jump today. And when you don't care anymore, that's when it happens.
You write that the goal is for us to master ourselves rather than everything around us. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
With horses, everywhere you go when you're training a horse where you run into a problem, it's you. It's like you're walking through this maze and you get to the end of the maze and you look and you say, oh, there's the exit. And then you realize, no, that's the mirror and you're seeing yourself and it's telling you, you have to work on yourself. So that's the amazing thing. That's why I think horses, for me, were such a spiritual experience is as teachers, they constantly said, you have to work on you if you want things to change.
You're listening to Dr. Allan Hamilton. He's professor of neurosurgery, radiation oncology, psychology, and electrical and computer engineering at the University of Arizona. He's written several books, including The Scalpel and the Soul and Zen Mind, Zen Horse. His most recent book, the one we're talking about, is Lead with Your Heart, Lessons from a Life with Horses.
We need to take a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss trust and freedom of choice.
How do you know when to let go?
We'll find out what horses can teach us about leadership. How does that apply to doctors and patients?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. If you're enjoying this People's Pharmacy podcast, why not head over to our website where you'll find a wealth of information on medications, conditions, home remedies, and ways to keep yourself healthy. You'll find it all at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Red X Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Foot Cream with shea butter, helping dry, cracked feet feel utterly soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
To order a CD of today's show or any People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is 1062. That number again, 800-732-2334, online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today we're talking with Dr. Allan J. Hamilton, a neurosurgeon and medical educator at the University of Arizona Health Sciences Center. He's also a horse trainer. His latest book is Lead with Your Heart, Lessons from a Life with Horses.
Dr. Hamilton, you talk a lot about trust, especially that communication and interaction between humans and horses. And I guess this idea of trust allowing freedom of choice for both parties is really important with horses and also with people. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that and how do you encourage it?
So one of the things that you really have to focus on with the horse is don't correct them before they make a mistake. Give them the freedom to make the mistake. So very often you can tell, like, for example, the horse is going to slow down. So you start to apply pressure to get the horse back up from the walk to the trot. So you go, he's going to slow down, so I'm going to go. No, you won't. You say it. You give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you won't, but you're going to let him commit. As one of my friends, Clinton Anderson, who's a horse trainer, says, you can't arrest somebody for thinking about robbing a bank. You have to wait till they do it. So the idea here is that you let somebody make the mistake and then you correct them. The second part is when you're teaching the horse, you want to make the right thing the absolute easiest thing for the horse to find. So the example I use is like skiing downhill. Skiing downhill is easy because you're going with gravity. Skiing uphill is a lot of work. So with the horse, when I'm trying to teach them and show them something and ask them to, learn something new, it's my job as the teacher, the parent, what have you, to make the right thing, the right answer, easy to find. And the wrong answer is work. So the horse goes, wait a minute, no, this is skiing downhill. Let's go that way. And you go, ta-da. So let me give you an example with Sonny, my wonderful quarter horse, my trail horse, who, when he was very young, he was crossing a stream in Colorado before I had him, and the stream swept him away, and he got very, very frightened and finally got to his feet and struggled to his feet, but he's never forgotten that water, frightened him like this. So any water, any puddle, anything that's water is going to freak him out. And if you think about it, a puddle is a very shiny surface, and the horse can't see where his feet are going in that surface. So he's afraid I might fall through there. So with Sonny, if you want to, when I work with him on this puddle phobia that he has, which is a bad problem when it's raining outside, believe me, you have to get through this. So with Sonny, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, he's scared of the puddle. So I want him to go through the puddle. But what's the very first thing you should do is say, well, I don't care if he goes in the puddle. And so what you do is you start walking around with him. And I put myself between him and the puddle. And we just start walking around the puddle. And we keep walking around the puddle. And eventually one of his feet touches the water. Nothing happened. We keep going. I'm more and more in the puddle with my wellies or what have you, and I'm walking more and more, and he's going, well, nothing happened to him. Maybe I'll put 2 feet in the puddle. And we just keep walking around, and I keep moving him around the perimeter of that puddle, but I never say you have to get in that puddle. In other words, I go, it's not important to me if you get through the puddle, because you will get through the puddle if I just concentrate on moving you around and not worrying about, am I going to drag you through the puddle or not? And over and over and over again, the answer to solving a horse's problem or a child's problem or a coworker's problem is let go. We have time for one story?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here's the ultimate let go example. I was up in the Rincon Mountains with Sonny. We were coming up from the Rincon Mountains are a mountain range to the east of Tucson. We're coming up from the backside, which is called Happy Valley. Sort of sounds like Valhalla or something, but we're coming up over from Happy Valley up over the ridge, and we get there, and there's a huge storm that has come up from the backside of this mountain, and it just envelops us. And we're in terrible rocks, and I can't see where I'm going, and the weather's horrible, and it's just a very, very dangerous situation. So I'm trying to pick my way through these rocks, but I don't know where I'm going. And I just sort of hear this thing, let go. So I go, okay, well, great. This is a great place to let go. We're going to fall down this mountain. So, we keep going a little bit more, and we're struggling, and he's slipping, and my horse is slipping, and then I hear it again, let go. So, I go, okay. So I take the reins and I just knot him, and I hang him over Sonny's neck, and I let go. And Sonny starts moving. Don't ask me how. I don't understand it. Sonny starts moving, and he picks his way around the rocks, and we're going through the storm, and we can't see anything. And about an hour later, I hear this clump, 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 and I realize we're on the wooden bridge that's 30 yards from the parking lot. And that he has got me all the way down this mountain just because I was willing to let go and let him use his sense of direction and smell and orientation and get us to where we had to go.
Well, that sounds like teamwork.
Yes, he did all the teamwork, and I rode on his back.
It also sounds like the opposite of a control freak, somebody who has to always be in charge, make the decisions, and force everyone else to follow the lead. And it sounds like in your case, you just said, I'm just going to step back and let Sonny do the work.
I think neurosurgeons are control freaks. I mean, that's one of the things that we go, we're dealing with the most important organ. It can't stand a mistake. Won't tolerate an error. So, in a lot of ways, for me, the horses are sort of the right brain of that experience, which is, you're not in control as much as you think you are, so let go.
I'd like to talk a little bit about leadership, because you've spent a lot of your career being a leader, being a teacher. And you talk a little bit about the 4 C's: command, control, compassion, and communication. I'd like to know a little bit more about that, and then how you came up with the title for this book, Lead with Your Heart.
So horses solve their conflicts 99% of the time without violence. Okay, they do it by body gestures. They do it by reminding the other horse of who's in charge and who isn't. But the idea is they communicate very much, that's my flake of hay over there, leave it alone. I don't have to kill you. I don't have to maim you, because that's dangerous for the whole group. If I break your leg, we're all going to be slowed down. So there's this attitude. I just have to communicate that I'm in control. I'm in command of the situation. I am compassionate, because I want to make sure if this is the only food we have, we're going to have to share it all. And so that horses have this exquisite capacity to tell each other what they need to do. Why? Because in 50 million years of evolution, when they have to run, there can't be any question about where are we running, how fast are we running, and where are we going to. And if you watch horses, wild Mustangs, when they're moving in a panic about something, they move in unison, absolutely perfectly matched. When they stop to look at a danger, the lead horse goes forward, the older horses are right behind her, the middle-aged horses behind them, and the youngest and most vulnerable are at the back. It's like with military precision, they line themselves up like that, because they communicate so effectively that this is the command, and this is the control, but also this is the compassion, and you need to get behind me where it's safe. So I look at that and say, those are great rules to use as a leader in medicine and in your family, in your work group, and in your organization. And the thing about it is you have to check in with the herd. The herd is the one that bestows the leadership mantle on you, and you have to earn it every day.
And how do we listen to the herd? I mean, it seems to me that there are a lot of people who, because of their situation, because they've been put in a role of being in charge, they think they have to be right. They think they have to, demand respect. But I think what I'm hearing from you is that whether it's in our family or in our workplace or with our friends or in our place of worship, that what we really need to be doing is listening.
I think you're right there. That which is, when we think as predators, we think of as individuals. Am I in charge? Am I the leader? Are they doing what I say? Horses have a completely different mentality. It's a we. It's much more of we're a group. So are we in charge? Are we in command? Are we going to find enough water for all of us? And it really is this ability to say, are we all together? Predators have to go after something. They have a kind of a eat what you kill. So if I'm in charge, I get to eat what I kill. And, if you think about a wolf pack or a lion pride, the oldest ones and the ones that are in charge rip all the meat they want. And then where they're done, whatever's left, that goes to the youngers and the weaker members. Okay, that's not how horse herds work. They go, we have to find enough food. All of us, not just me, all of us. And so, I think in the 21st century, when you look at what we've done to the planet, what we're doing to populations, what we're doing to children who are starving and all the other things, is this world is small enough that we really need to start thinking about, are we a herd? The predator strategy worked for 250 million years, but we're now on the edge of the cliff. The planet's warming up. We're 90% of the species are threatened. We're going to have the greatest wiping out of species since a meteor hit the planet 65 million years ago, and we're doing it as predators.
When I think of medicine, I think that there is often an imbalance in the sense that the healer, the physician, is the leader, and the patient is, part of the herd, supposed to follow the leader's recommendations. And sometimes that relationship is one of turmoil if the patient doesn't want to take the medication or has experienced side effects from the drug or is a little anxious about the surgery. How do we create what you're describing in terms of leadership between health professionals and their patients?
Well, I think there's a big difference between being a doctor and being a healer. Okay, I think as a doctor, you're walking in and going, well, you have the brain tumor and I don't, and I have all the wisdom about how to fix it and how to image it, and you have to do what I say. What I found working with Native American shaman and healers is there's not that feeling. Their feeling is, I have entered into this with you. I'm a part of you now as we take this on. And I think we need to take a page from that and say, we're in this journey together. You were asking about things that I've learned from horses. I watched a videotape once of me putting films up back when we still were putting films up on light boxes, and the patient was behind me and I was talking to the films. Okay, so I clearly said the films are more important and my interpretation is more important, and you have to catch whatever I say over my shoulder. So, but if I'm thinking as a horse person, I go, no, I want to stand next to that person. I want to send them the message, we are looking at our films together. I'm not a spectator. I am with you. I'm a guide. We're on a journey, and we're going to experience things together. And that's what is the difference. And so we have a new generation of doctors. And I go that the requirements are pretty simple. You need to be digitally sophisticated, you need to be a good team player, and you need to be compassionate. You need to have empathy, and it can't wear off. That's one of the big problems we have. But we can teach compassion. We can teach us how to listen more carefully, and we can teach ourselves that it's okay to feel with that patient, because that's the difference between being a spectator and watching what goes on and being a healer who says, I participate in the journey with you. You can hold my hand. I have been here before. Let's move into this landscape of unknown territory together.
And are the medical students that are coming along, do they meet those criteria? Are they going with you?
They are, and they're so idealistic. And what I worry about is, we have these parties for the chief residents when they finish their training after, 5 years or 7 years of residency. And they're so sarcastic and they're so cynical, and they've got such a dark humor about them. And I once went up to one of the chief residents that I knew very well, and I said, Andy, how did you get this way? And he said, look at yourselves. You're the window through which we learn to see medicine, and it's a very dark picture. And until we change our attitudes and our behaviors, we can't change the behaviors of the students and the next generation that are coming up. So there's a lot of pressure for us to say we have to make some changes because we're poisoning the well. We're the ones that are making doctors feel cynical and sarcastic and feeling like the patient is a piece of meat instead of like, there, but for the grace of God, go I. We're trying to teach people, how do you love a perfect stranger perfectly? That's the take-home message of what medicine is really about. Learning to do that and become a good enough person that you can succeed at that.
Dr. Allan Hamilton, thank you so much for joining us again on the People's Pharmacy.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to Dr. Allan Hamilton. He was formerly chief of neurosurgery and chairman of the Department of Surgery at the University of Arizona Health Sciences Center. He's currently professor of neurosurgery, radiation oncology, psychology, and electrical and computer engineering at the University of Arizona Health Sciences Center. He was a script consultant for the television series Grey's Anatomy. His books include The Scalpel and the Soul, Zen Mind, Zen Horse, and his most recent, Lead with Your Heart, Lessons from a Life with Horses. You can learn more from his website, Allan, A-L-L-A-N, Hamilton.com. There's a link to it from our website.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Al Wadarsky is the engineer. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Red-X Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Extra Care 20 Cream with 20% urea for extra skin protection. The number's 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you'd like to order a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1062. That number, 800-732-2334, online at peoplespharmacy.com.
When you visit our site, you can check out information on prescription drugs, herbal medicines, and home remedies. Share your thoughts on today's show. We'd love to have your feedback.
At our website, you can also sign up for our free online newsletter or the free podcast of the show. Listen to it at your own convenience or share it with a friend. It's all there at peoplespharmacy.com.
In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thanks for listening. Join us again next week.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to The People's Pharmacy.